Love is not something that you read in a textbook. It's not something you read in a manual. It is something that you experience, that you become aware of. And that was the beginning stage for me of coming into a deeper level of awareness and peace. Although I didn't understand it at the time. As Jesus said, the kingdom of God is within you, that dimension within us that is one with the source of life, that is one with you and everyone. That was a moment of complete freedom. And when you come to that point where you realize that true life is this inner life, and that is constantly the same. It's always in the present moment. It's always in the now. It's beyond thoughts. It's a deeper life. It's the very divine life, the divine spark within us.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Vibrant Soul Society, The Conversations. I'm your host, Baba Sam, the Miracle Man. The mission of the show is to help you discover that you are greater than your thoughts, and beyond your thoughts is this vibrant soul that doesn't know all these human limitations. So thanks for your likes, your comments, your subscribes. Help getting this message out there that we are greater than our thoughts. So today we have a very special guest on the Conversations. David, welcome to the Conversations.
Thank you so much, Baba. I'm really looking forward to being with you and speaking with you today.
I'm really curious. If we just met at a science and spirituality conference, what would it be surprised to discover about you?
That's a big question. I'm not even sure. I guess my story really is I came from a evangelical background where I was a pastor and minister and actually spoke around the world. I came to a crisis in my life where I began to evaluate what was happening, and then came to, and I'll just make it really short here so we can get into it later more maybe. But I really came to this kind of a crisis where I began to consider, who am I? And what is deeper than my religious pursuits or my religious doctrine? Is there a deeper reality that is more inclusive, something that truly transforms my life rather than just a mental dogma, story, and narrative that has been passed down from one generation to the next?
Right. So what it reminds me of when I'm evangelical pastor is my uncle's the same way. He travels the world, he gives his message. And when I was suicidal in my 20s, he came into my room in the mental hospital. He came into my room and he tries to cast the demons from my head. So that really pushed me away from the spiritual and religious world because I was like, I'm not possessed. I don't have these demons in my head. So that's very interesting that our paths are very similar in that way, but you dove into religion, but then you had a crisis and said, okay, what do I do with this? And for me, I was having a crisis and like, oh, I'm not possessed. So I stayed stuck with that.
Yeah. You know, what happened for me was there was really three different incidents between 2004 and 2008 that had a profound impact on my life. The first incident was I was pastoring a great church and I was a president of Bible College. I was on television. I had a lot of different things outwardly going for me. Then I had this opportunity to be part of something else, and I decided I would go to the golf course because I wanted to just be still and know exactly what to do. I went to the golf course and I deliberately said, I don't want to play with anybody. I just want to play by myself. I went to the first hole and I noticed there was a gentleman who was about 500 yards away finishing the hole. I thought, I'm going to take my time so I don't catch up to him. Not that I'm a good golfer anyhow, but I thought, I want to take my time so that I don't catch up and that I'll be able to play by myself. So I took my time. And by the time I reached the second hole, I noticed that the gentleman was sitting on a bench and he was there waiting for me. So he said to me, do you want to play? Now I have a choice. I can be rude and say, no, want nothing to do with this. But then I thought that would be rude. So I said yes. And then I thought to myself, well, I'm going to convert him to my belief system. I did that for however long you play golf, and I noticed something very unique about this gentleman. He didn't believe what I did, and he found actually my very dogmatic way of speaking to be almost a little bit, not annoying, but he thought there's a greater way of being, and that is being of love, being a person of peace. And so he started talking about some of these things, which I didn't understand at the time, that, now, of course, I speak about. But so he just exuded this warmth, he exuded this love, he exuded this compassion and peace. And me, on the other hand, I was very dogmatic. I was more like, you better just convert to my beliefs. This was almost like you got to become like me in order for you to be saved, you know? And so I came out of that, and then I thought about it. This man had a greater impact on me, not because he had told me what he believed, but because he exuded a warmth, a love, and peace. And I thought, what is more important? My holding fast to my beliefs, a mental story, a narrative, or is it more important to actually exude, to have a sense of peace and a sense of love? And love is not something that you read in a textbook. It's not something you read in a manual. It is something that you experience, that you become aware of. And that was the beginning stage for me of coming into a deeper level of awareness and peace, although I didn't understand it at the time.
Yeah, so that's really interesting because 2004 was a pivotal moment for you that you got to see this gentleman that was really just put on your path to show a different way. It's quite interesting because in 2004, I lost the ability to walk from multiple sclerosis and my health was in really a serious decline. I think the universe put this person in your path, or maybe they were an angelic being. They were just showing you like what you're trapped in your belief system. This isn't what God is about. God is about love, peace, compassion. So maybe he was showing you a different way of being. And it sounded like your life shifted more after this experience.
No, it wasn't a big shift at that particular time. I was still in my beliefs, but it was more like a reflection afterwards. But what happened in 2005, so 2005, we moved from Canada to California. And I left everything. There was a lot of things that happened. I was very angry. A lot of different things were taking place in my life. I just thought, this is just not right. I started looking around at all the people in my evangelicals and my Pentecostal circles, and none of them actually lived what they talked about. This wonderful Christian life wasn't working for them. I remember being quite upset and angry about the whole thing, and I suddenly started having cluster headaches. I don't know if you're familiar with cluster headaches, according to Google, and I say this jokingly because one time I said in a meeting, cluster headaches is the worst pain a human can suffer.
Mm-hmm.
And a lady raised her hand and said, you are wrong. Giving birth to children is more painful. So I'm very careful what I say nowadays because obviously I have not given birth to any children. I have children, but I've not given birth to them. My wife was the one who had to do that. But anyhow, it was such a severe pain that I felt like someone was sticking a knife in my eye and twisting the knife around, and I was just overwhelmed. I would lay on bed and scream and just, I want this to be over. And I would pray. I would do all the and evangelical things I knew how to do, and nothing worked. I got worse rather than getting better. Then one day I came out of the blue. It was so foreign to my things just to meditate. I didn't know anything about meditation. I didn't know how to do it, so I just slumped into my car and began to focus my attention on divine love. And within 2 minutes, and you got to understand, I had this cluster headaches. It was to the point where I had it like in the beginning, I had it every second day, then multiple times a day. So this was now in 2006. I had had this for such a long time that I just thought I'd rather die than live. But as I began to meditate within 2 minutes, the pain has never returned since. It was just something that freed within my mind the anger, all the different things, because I had this experience of love. There was such a peace about it. I truly connected with the deepest essence of myself, which I didn't understand at the time, but I just connected with the deepest essence of myself, with that divine unifying essence where as Jesus said, the kingdom of God is within you, that dimension within us that is one with the source of life, that is one with you and everyone. That was a moment of complete freedom. Another 2 years later, I still was dealing with a lot of different things in my life and I hadn't come to complete freedom in many areas. I remember sitting on my bed saying, Jesus, you said you shall know the truth and the truth shall make you free. I said, I know so many people in my religious circle who are not free. So obviously we are missing something about the truth. And that led to a discovery of meditation and getting deeper into this, coming to a point of the awareness of your deeper essence beyond thought, that was deeper than thought, deeper than belief system, deeper than theology, and deeper than any other things, and just pure awareness. And and then understanding how to live out of this pure awareness, out of this deeper essence, your deeper self.
Well, yeah, I can really relate to this. I had chronic migraines that would send me to the ER. It was so bad where the medication wouldn't work at times. I would end up in the ER at least every other month. And so I totally get with that cluster headache. And you said something interesting too. You discovered meditation and then you felt like within 2 minutes, this divine love come over you. And there's a lot of similarities here too, because I also found meditation, and the way I found meditation was just really unusual. But I was led to meditation, and through meditation, I discovered I had thoughts, but I wasn't my thought. This was a huge realization for me because in my 20s, I took my thoughts as true and nearly killed myself twice because of that negative voice telling you life is too hard, too difficult, and all these negative stories. But like I said, I was pushed away from the spiritual realms. So I didn't have any concept of spirit, of soul, of consciousness, nothing. So, like, all right, I know I'm not my thoughts. Well, who am I? I was sitting with that question. My meditation was 5 minutes twice a day, just sitting, relaxing. Then one evening after meditation, the best I can describe it, I felt this great sense of peace come over me. I just heard a voice say perfect spirit to my who am I question. I heard a voice say perfect spirit. I'm like, that's it. My spirit is perfect. I'm not this damaged body and mind. I felt this great sense of peace. I knew all was well, and I knew all my health challenges were over. And they were. I was sick and disabled for nearly 40 years. It took some time for the body to catch up, but I just had this trust in this voice that all is well and the body is recovering.
What a beautiful story, Baba. I was going to say that, are you 40? So I was surprised when you said for 40 years.
Yeah, nearly 60.
But besides that, it's incredible and very good, many similarities there in our stories. And it's so true that I think one of the biggest revelations for me was coming to the point of understanding I'm not my thoughts. And actually, it's one thing to know in theory, but actually to experience it, to know that I'm not your thoughts, to actually begin to identify with that unfiltered consciousness and just to become aware of it, awareness itself, become aware of awareness itself, and allow that now to transform how we think and remove the egoic patterns in our mind about I, me, or mine, and all the other things that, what neuroscientists call the default mode network, where we just default to me and mine and what I can do and all those things, and just come to a place of inner stillness where we all one, where we all part of the divine, and we all one together at a very mystical and deep level that maybe our minds cannot fully comprehend. And for me, that led to then study quantum physics, neuroscience, and all these spiritual traditions, and also begin to study the wisdom of Jesus through a Aramaic lens rather than through a westernized Christian lens. And that completely floored me when I had this understanding of what Jesus was truly saying. It was so much deeper. So yeah, I studied all those different things once I began to have that experience myself.
I really did no studying at that point. Like I said, the way I found meditation was really out there, but I just trusted this voice or this inner knowing for those 14 months the body was recovering. I wasn't reading anything about this spiritual realms. That still wasn't part of my reality. I was just trusting this deeper voice. Then at the end of my journey, people were asking me, like, well, what did you do? How did you do this? That's when I wrote my first book. And that's when I started to begin to understand and start reading the spiritual texts and start to understand. And I read a book from Ayashante called The End of Your World, who outlined exactly what I went through, but I didn't know I was going through it. I was just
Yeah,
realizing
yeah.
like, this deeper essence.
I think that's the same thing for me too. I didn't know. It was more like I said, okay, well, I need to understand what's happening here because this is far out. So then as I began to read about it, I began to explore because naturally I'm interested in exploring both from a scientific point of view, from a spiritual point of view. I like to explore all of things because ultimately they're all connected. Science may have different words and there's always a discovery. They're always learning new things, but ultimately it will confirm. We know intuitively anyhow. So it's just helpful to have words for it. Of course, I've written quite a number of books, but they've all been a journey, step-by-step journey, how I processed things at that time.
Right. So that was really interesting, your journey, that you had all this spiritual teaching and dogma, and you really had to free yourself from this because you even mentioned that your pastor friends weren't free. they weren't living what they were teaching, that they were caught up in their mind and completely identified with their mind. So, what was that process for you to let go of all this dogma and really to be free?
Great question. And it was a journey as it didn't happen overnight. But as I continued to hold on to meditation and I made that a daily, I meditated and slowly and surely, I noticed that I didn't see things as I used to. It wasn't that I sought to change. It wasn't like, I don't want to believe this anymore. It was just that I began to see maybe from a little, I don't want to over spiritualized or even as far as talking about myself in a way that I had seen something that others have not seen, but I saw it from a higher viewpoint, you could say. It was like I saw things from a high viewpoint that was more inclusive. So I didn't reject my past. I just saw it from a different viewpoint that was much more inclusive, where I recognized that all of us are on different journeys. And ultimately, to me, what was important was not who had the right mental concept or belief system, but was that they were actually living a life of freedom, where they were living a life of peace, inner peace and joy and compassion and empathy toward others. And that to me became more important than their particular belief system or their story on how the world works. I think it was more of a journey of just slowly the old ways of thinking just dropped off, and I became more aware of a new reality that is more based on inner life rather than outer belief system, doctrine, or thoughts.
Right. I really like how you mentioned that you just had a bad migraine and decided to meditate, and then the change happened for you. And that's the same thing with my healing. I had no idea that I would heal. To me, it was impossible. And I read all these millions of articles and everything else saying you're incurable. But then I tell people healing is not about trying, it's really about surrender and letting go. And that's what meditation does, because I say that your spirit, your soul knows exactly how to take you to the kingdom of God, you could say, that inner place where everything just falls into place with the mind interfering. So it's really interesting to hear your journey and how it's so similar to mine, but just in a slightly different flavor.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. Because, words have limitations, but we're all used to certain words. So I come from my particular background and I'm used to certain terminology. But it doesn't mean I'm locked into that terminology. I'm not making a religion out of my terminology, but I use it to point to a greater reality. We all have a story. We all have a terminology that we kind of have adapted or we have learned or whatever that fits within our background. And that is wonderful. But it all points to a deeper reality. And that deeper reality is the same, that we are interconnected. We are one at the very deep level. And we can call it consciousness. In quantum physics, when it talks about the observer effect or the entanglement, all these different quantum physics idea, it just speaks to a oneness and a unifying field. There is a consciousness that exists in the entire universe, and that we are simply an emanation. We're all an emanation of the same consciousness of the one life, so to speak. And we have different stories, different ways of telling that story, different experiences, but we're all part of the same. And that's the beauty. So the more we can understand that, the more we can actually enjoy each other's story. Like I enjoy listening to your story and to hear different stories, even though we come from different backgrounds. And hearing some of the things that happened earlier, you shared some interesting stories about your beginning. It's just fascinating. It's fascinating to me because it just speaks to we're all on this journey, and it's pointing toward a place deep within us of awakening, of awareness, and of our true essence, so to speak.
Yeah, that's why I really enjoy doing this show, the conversations, because everyone's had a different human experience, and some of them were quite dramatic and painful. But ultimately, they found this deeper reality, this vibrant soul, and their life shifted and changed dramatically.
I like how you say that vibrant soul.
As they say in the Bible, we're made in the image and likeness of God, and that is the light.
Yeah. It's interesting when you mention that because in the same book of Genesis, in the beginning, it says that God breathed. Of course, this is very metaphorical language, but God breathed into the nostrils of man and became a living being. It says he had created out of the dust of the earth, he created the body, but then he breathed life. What is that to me? It's, some people get all caught up in the actual, well, it's a metaphor. When you breathe, of course, that speaks to life, right? It speaks to consciousness. That speaks to that you're alive, your consciousness. So the very life that we have is essentially is something that is the very breath of God, is the very spirit that breathes into us, that causes us to be come alive and have this. And that is the same for everybody. All life has that to some extent.
Right. When you were saying breath of God is reminding me that God is within all of us. So we're having the experience of God.
Absolutely. Most of us are so caught up in our minds that we're not aware of it. And the whole wonderful beauty of it is when we become aware, we begin to see more broadly. One of the reasons in my book, Life Ascending, that came out this year, I talk about life ascending. One of the stories I share is when I started to work in Tanzania with orphan children, and I would actually drive. There was this, I had to fly into this city, and then they closed down the airport for a few years. So we had to fly to a different city and take a car ride for 8 hours through some of the worst roads ever invented. They were like potholes everywhere. I was afraid for my life. I would sit there and shake. It was the most comfortable ride, and I would swear to myself I'd never do this again. I was just filled with this, like, why do I have to do this? And then one day I decided, well, there's got to be another way. And I learned of this private airline that would fly in minors, and they would drop me off and they only charge a couple of $100s. I thought, well, this is wonderful. So I flew in this small little Cessna, and it took an hour to get there. But above, I noticed how these crooked paths and these potholes and this nature that I had aggravated me, got me so upset. I noticed how beautiful, how there was a sense of unity and oneness about everything. It was just when you were sitting up there in the airplane, I looked down, I said, oh, this is so beautiful. But down there below, I was so caught up in every little moment of whatever and in anticipation of something bad to happen. But up there, I just saw the beauty of it. And that's what it means that life is ending, when you come to that point where you realize that true life is not this, the true life is this inner life. And that is constantly the same. It's always in the present moment. It's always in the now. It's beyond thoughts. It's a deeper life. It's a very divine life, the divine spark within us.
Yeah, I mean, what I was thinking when you're saying greater perspective, it reminds me like the mind is trapped in the closet. It just knows the four walls and the immediate surrounding, which is our thoughts and beliefs. But when we drop deeper into this deeper essence, into our soul, spirit, whatever we should call it, we do have this greater perspective to see things differently and just to appreciate the beauty of life and the awe of life. Like every day waking up like, thank you, another day.
Absolutely. That's so beautiful right there. Thank you for life.
Yeah, just to appreciate the fact that we get so caught up in the drama, we forget the simple fact that we're alive. And a lot of people that were here yesterday are not here today. That we got another day of life.
Isn't it interesting when you actually come to that point when you begin to observe your thoughts? You are not your thoughts, you are the observer behind the thoughts. And then you realize how much useless thinking we do. You have a thought, and then you start thinking about that. You start going down a rabbit trail, and then you incorporate yourself into that story, and you feel like, oh, I was not treated well, or this shouldn't have happened, and those people are wrong, and they didn't hear me. It's like a story about self, and how that never leads to any kind of peace. It always leads to a sense of inner suffering. But when you come to that place of inner stillness, you're just aware, you're free from the suffering of the mind.
Yeah, I really like the phrasing you use there. Incorporate yourself into the story. It's exactly what I was doing. You give me an MS label, a bipolar label, a migraine label. I fit myself into that story, which is a miserable existence.
Absolutely.
We're defending our story as well. This is who I am. I'm bipolar. You get really defensive with that, and people have a hard time letting go of that identity, thinking that they are their thoughts and their beliefs.
Yeah, it becomes like a repetitive story, right? As a neuroscientist, I like that terminology that I mentioned, a default mode network. And it's like you default to it. It just naturally comes there naturally. And that's why I believe meditation is so incredibly useful to retrain your mind and your brain to let go of those and just live in a state of awareness.
I love how you meant to call that the default mode network, because I see individuals all the time. Does your ailment need to be there forever? Or they hear my story and they're like, I can never do that. And they walk away because that's their default mode network, that they're trapped into the incurable story or what they're identifying with as
Yeah. It's interesting how the brain works. There is a reward system or dopamine that is released, which is very important, and we become addicted to it. I was reading a book about how so many people are addicted to their cell phone. And you start scrolling, it gives you like a dopamine, it gives you like a reward. It triggers the reward system of your brain where you feel good when you discover something new. The opposite is also true for people who feel like they've been victimized, they've been wrong. That story give in a strange way, seems strange, but it actually triggers this reward system and releases dopamine to kind of justify that I have been wrong, these things are happening, and this is the reason why. It gives them a sense of satisfaction, it gives them a sense of pleasure that there is a reason why I'm having this difficult time. So don't mess with this. Don't try to change this because I'm actually getting something from this. I'm getting some form of joy in the perverted sense, right? And it's some kind of reward for being this way. And so it's very true what you're saying.
Yeah, it just reminded me of a story too of Deepak Chopra. There was a film on his life, and he said afterwards, I was surprised how addicted I was to my device.
Isn't it true though? I look at my phone and I think way too much. I'm trying to put it away as much as possible and just to become aware. And that works for periods of time, but then there's something calls you back. I got to check this. I haven't checked that today and I haven't done this. And even with news, I've tried to stay away because I notice the news really triggers some fear, sometimes anger, sometimes whatever, all these different emotions. And that is not helpful. And it really, what can I do anyhow about what's happening in the world, right?
Yeah, so it's really trying to find that balance. I find myself checking my device as well, thinking like, if somebody sends me a message, do they have a question? Does somebody need help? Constantly addicted to that as well, that I'm trying to be of service, but it's keeping me tethered as well. So it's trying to find this balance.
I know it's true. I think in a perfect world, I would just look at my phone once a week. That will be about enough.
Yeah, the ideal world we just have an assistant. Here's an email you need to respond to. Here's this that needs a response. And just give it to the assistant. Just let me know when I need to respond or acknowledge something.
Yeah, no, it's true. But I don't know whether that helped because I've had some assistants and they look at these things. I still continue to look at my phone. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. We just take it for granted, but as long as we realize and stay present with it so we don't get lost and trapped
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
forgetting our deeper essence.
Exactly. It's a metaphor. The phone is a metaphor for a deeper truth, a deeper reality that exists within us. It's like you can get lost on the phone. You just keep scrolling and keep finding new things. But we get so easily get lost in our own stories, in our own little world, that we are not in the present moment. We're not living in the present moment. One thing I've discovered is this: when you truly live out of the deepest essence, you're always in the present moment. You're not in the future, you're not in the past, but you're living in the now. And so many of us are trapped in our little stories. And we have you can actually tell on some people that they're lost in their mind. They don't observe reality. They're so lost in their minds. And this phone is just another kind of a metaphor for that, I think, in some way.
Yeah, but this is how advertising works. They want you to get lost in YouTube or the TV show. They want to get you lost in the show, lost in this moment. So you're more susceptible to their programming, to their ads.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very true. And as they use that dopamine, it gives you like the little kick. You feel good when you discover something new or something interesting. And, we have a problem. I think how we raise children is also detrimental to them, that we don't learn to live in moments of boredom. We never want to be bored, but there is something valuable about being bored once in a while. You don't always have to have something going on, that you can actually just take a few moments, because I think if you sit in even if it's a few moments of boredom and you just sit outside, for example, and say I'm bored, and then you just become aware, become still, the boredom disappears and you feel a sense of peace. You can even feel the breeze against your cheeks, the aroma from flowers. You are aware, your sense perceptions are magnified. You become more attuned with what's happening around you.
Yeah, that's really it. We need to stay present. And you brought up something really important, conscious parenting, because most parenting is not conscious. They're just reenacting what their parents did. So it might be a generational issue that there's a problem in the family that keeps repeating itself because there's not conscious parenting. It reminds me of the Bible again. They know not what they do. because they're so caught
Absolutely.
up in the thoughts.
And Jesus said, forgive them for they know not what they do. In other words, they have no concept who they are. They have no concept of it because they're lost in their stories about how the world works. And that Jesus speaks to that deeper dimension within them by saying, forgive them. They have no concept.
Yeah, so now I'm curious from this other perspective, because you looked at it from the Aramaic perspective. I only know the Western part of it. Was there something even deeper that he gets into in regards to that?
Well, there's many different stories. I'm trying to remember something specific about that particular scripture. But what I would say to you is this: there are so many interesting things. For example, let me give you just a few thoughts from the Aramaic that may be helpful. So, for example, I made reference earlier to what Jesus' word says, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Now, the word for truth in Aramaic is shrara, which means an inner light arising in the present moment, which is so different from what most
Mm.
people will think truth is a belief system or dogma or something like that, or doctrine. No, it's an inner light arising in the present moment from within, an inner light. Now, what is light? You begin to think about what is light, that which is illuminates. And what is that is truly is the greatest illumination. Without consciousness, there is no perception, no thought, there is absolutely nothing. So the greatest illuminator, consciousness or spirit. And so that you shall know the truth, and the word know means to be aware of it. It doesn't mean that you have knowledge about it, but you're aware of this inner light arising in the present moment, and that brings freedom. So essentially, your story is a testimony to knowing the truth, this inner light within. And that's what Jesus said. So that gives it a whole different meaning, right?
Completely. You're not depending on somebody else for truth.
Exactly. It's just like you're awakening to it. And then Jesus said something else, and that I don't know if you've ever heard this in church or in the people who are Christians. Pray in the name of Jesus. You got to pray in the name of Jesus. Now, understand there are several things in there. First of all, the word prayer can also be translated meditation. It was the same word. So prayer wasn't like, well, you got to say a bunch of words. No, it was meditation. And then in the name was not like, oh, there's some magic in one name. There's some magic in that name, which is a lot of times how it's presented. The name meant simply in the light, in the atmosphere, in the sound, in the vibration. So think of that. So Jesus was saying, pray in same atmosphere, in the same vibration of love, of peace, of graciousness and forgiveness. Pray in that in my name, and the Father will hear. So it takes us so much deeper, right? So think about when we come into that place of inner stillness and when we're just meditating. We come to a place of stillness, and maybe there's something that we need in our life. In that moment of inner stillness, we can begin to visualize and see our healing, to see all those different things transforming our minds because we're aware of these deeper essence. So understanding the Aramaic, I mean, those are just two examples, but there are so many examples of this that are just incredible and put such a different spin on things than our Western interpretation of Jesus.
That original translation will give you transformation and freedom. It won't keep you locked into the dogma.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
David, I really enjoyed our conversation. If people had questions, how would they reach out to you?
Well, first of all, I encourage people to get my book. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and other different stores. It's called Life Ascending: Unlocking Mental Well-Being Through Timeless Wisdom and New Science. And it's been incredibly well received. Very happy about that. Another way they can reach out to me is if they go to youngrensubstack.com. I produce posts there, and some of them is for paid, some of them is for free. Articles and meditations and teachings I have there continually on that site. So I encourage people to go there. There's a free subscription they can join. And then they can go to our website, davidyoungren.com. And also, I don't know when this will be aired, but we're doing a tour coming up in this coming fall in Eastern United States. We're hoping to be actually in your part of the New York City area sometime. I don't have any confirmed dates yet, but yeah, we're looking forward to that.
Yes, I'm absolutely looking forward to reading your book, Life Ascending. I'm an avid reader. I like to read every day because I like to see different perspectives. That's why I have this show. I want to see and hear different perspectives. It's like a kid in the candy store. I want to hear about all these experiences and how we're stepping into this greater essence. I'll definitely have this out there before the fall. I would love to see you in the New York area, and maybe we can do a follow-up podcast to this in person. That would be a
Oh,
beautiful
that would be
experience.
amazing. I would love that. Bob, I want to say that when I see some of the podcast requests, and a lot of times I know that's not for me. I don't like that. And I've had an assistant tell me, do you want this? And I basically turned down like 9 out of 10. But then I read your story and I thought, Baba has a very similar story to mine. I gotta connect with this gentleman. And so I find it such an incredible honor and privilege for me to be here with you today and to connect with someone who in some ways have had a similar journey to mine. Even though we use different words and all of that, we still have a similar journey. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's great. So I'll have this out probably sometime in August so people can join you on that fall tour. And yeah, it's really about finding that deeper essence, and our paths are so similar. Even the years are so similar. It's really uncanny, but there's no mistakes in the universe.
What year were you born?
I was born in 67.
Oh, so I'm a little older than you, but I was born in 62.
Not too much, though. Same decade.
Same decade, that's for sure.
I want to thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. Enjoy this conversation. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor to meet you and connect with you today. I wish you all the very best. I look forward to hopefully seeing you in your part of the world.
Absolutely.